and we had a discussion about. She presented about her play, and I was completely blown away by the presentation. I had the great opportunity of reading the script before it went into production. So anyway, that's what brings me here today. As far as our presenters, we have Lara Zakaria. I'm not going to. We have fairly long biographies. Lara is a Syrian-American pharmacist and nutritionist residing in New York City. She has over 15 years' experience in pharmacy. Sorry? Okay, well, moving on.
You guys can read it. If you're really interested, you guys can read it.
Tell what organization you represent.
So I work for the Syrian American Medical Society. I'm actually on the national board as well as the local tri-state chapter president.
And Vita Mustafi is Assistant Commissioner, External Affairs for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And of course, Irene Cappuccina is the writer and director of this, I think, fabulous incredible play. I wanted to start by asking each of you, starting with Lara, what part of the play, the entire play, as far as I understand, was incredibly powerful, incredibly moving. Was there a particular moment which really stood out for you, which you could talk to us about briefly?
I don't know if there was a particular moment that stood out for me specifically. For me, it was the drawing of emotions, being able to. So it's very easy. This has been going on for 7 years, and it's very easy for us to just kind of become numb to the news. It's very easy to just say, oh, another bombing, another city that's under attack, another city that is, that is under siege. But when you start to hear the story from a personal angle, that's when it starts to come to life. And I think the ability to have that in a play, I think it gives it a unique ear and a fresh perspective, in that we're actually listening again, and we're actually kind of connecting emotionally and reminding ourselves that these are human beings at the end of the day, that really these are real lives, real stories that have happened.
Thank you. And Vita, same question to you, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo that and just elaborate in saying that, part of the conflict generally, Syria or kind of really anywhere in the world, part of the challenge that you have as somebody that's observing, right, it's not directly impacted by the situation, is trying to sort of understand it in a way that's not entertainment, that's not shock value, that's not sort of looking at it from the sort of frankly power structure that's created and the media structure that's created that feeds the information to you, but stripping that away as much as possible to get down to impact, right? What does it mean that this is happening at this macro level? And the best way to often do that is to tell the stories of people who happen to be at the crossfires, who are not the power players, who are not the decision makers, but who happen to be directly impacted in a way that it's hard for those who aren't to imagine. And I think anytime you're able to tell those stories in a way that allows you to strip that away, it can be very powerful.
And Irene, of course, you wrote the play. And,
yeah, I'm going to take off my hat, my writer's hat, and I'm just going to have my human hat.
Right.
It's interesting, I just had this conversation yesterday about the play, and I said, and it just occurred to me that the most important part of the play is the first part of the play. It's not the killing, it's not the documentary aspect of the conflict, it's the human aspect. Because the second part of the play doesn't work if the first part isn't there. So that kind of going back to why we're doing it is because the word refugee and the crisis, the world crisis, is just numbers and statistics, and behind that is a fiancé, a housewife with very tangible dreams and very tangible lives. And so that's what the first part is about, because then we're saying, oh, it's not a refugee girl, it's a fiancée that lost her husband, right, future husband. But for me, as an immigrant, as a human, I think the part of the play is the most telling about the crisis and about the whole dilemma that we are facing as people, is when, to me, is when two women are saying goodbye to each other. And I always ask myself a question: who is the hero there? The person who stays and dies, or the person who chooses to leave? And I think both of them are. And this is the duality of the experience, right? People who chose to sacrifice their lives, and people who had courage to leave everything behind and face the unknown, and not knowing what's going to happen to them, to their loved ones, and witnessing, like, you know what, everything in front of your eyes and being completely incapable of helping or doing anything, and just kind of, so that is the moment that I think is so characteristic of the situation that people who lost their homes or were forced out of their homes find themselves in. And also, she had no choice. I mean, she had literally a choice to either live or die, right? And I think for me also that's important to understand, is people are not living by choice. People are forced to move.
If I may add just a couple of very minor points. The theme that we hear is the importance of the humanization of these people. They each and every one of them has a story. My PhD is in Islamic Studies, which I recently finished, and part of what I'm trying to do in my work is humanizing these Muslims. Typically Muslims in this sort of narrative that we saw unfold before us today, and on the global stage today, is Muslims are stripped of their humanity in so many ways, and it's the very complex powers and sort of forces at work here. So how can we take back some of that narrative? I think that's very important. So thank you for that. Now, in terms of practical actions, I think everyone, this is certainly my experience, this is the second time I see the play, is what can we do if we feel compelled to do something? What are some practical steps that we can take?
So everybody's going to be in a different place. Some people are in a place where they're just starting to wrap their feelings and their thoughts around what's going on, and that's okay. And I think for that person, it's learning what they can, maybe speaking to somebody that knows more about the crisis, and educating themselves and reading what they can about it. Other people might be in a place where they're ready to take some action, and they might want to either volunteer in some way, or they might want to donate money to an organization or something like that. The most important thing is that you do something, whatever it is that's in your capability, whatever it is that resonates for you. Because for some people who might be physicians, that might be going and volunteering in Jordan or in another country that is housing refugees. For other people, it might be maybe, so I know this group of volunteers in New York City, and it's literally 2,000 people that were in this position where they didn't know what to do. People from all walks of life that were just felt stunned and felt like there was not much that they could do towards this crisis, and they just came together. This woman, her name is Amber, formed this group, and it's literally a Facebook group, and people just lend what they can. So if it means that they're in PR and maybe they do something to assist an organization that needs PR that's maybe doing something like this. Maybe it's there's a call for action that there's a new refugee family just came to New York, and they might need certain furnishings, or they might be looking for something specific. They need tutoring for the kids. Whatever it is, they find that thing, and they're able to then connect the people that have that skill. And I think that's so cool because it's so rewarding. You're able to actually help the person. You're able to do something, and you're able to do it in a way that is just, that's a gift that you've been given. So I think that's great. Now, because I work for the Syrian American Medical Society, I have to obviously plug the Syrian American Medical Society. And so you'll notice in your programs that there is a brochure and a flyer for an upcoming symposium. We're actually having a national symposium. So one of the things you can do is support an organization like SAMS. You don't have to support SAMS, but I happen to like SAMS. So talking about SAMS. So we have our upcoming symposium in October. You are invited to the gala if you'd like to attend and learn more about what the organization is doing. You could go to the website and learn more. You're also welcome to donate as well. But find organizations that resonate for you, that are doing work that you appreciate, and support them. And then tell people about it. Share it on your social media. Talk to your friends and family. Educate other people as you're becoming educated as well, and bring them to events like this.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly won't add to
Very exhaustive list.
no, that wonderful list of things you can plug into in terms of either donation of dollars or time and ways to get involved. I'll just add that this crisis started in a different era in this country, right? A different president and a different sort of political atmosphere. And the one that we find ourselves in today adds layers of challenges to what it is that each and every one of us is responsible for and to do in this moment. And so I'll simply say, from the mayor's office, we live in a city that is nearly 40% foreign-born. If you add the children of immigrants, that takes you to 60%. And we're living in a moment where on a daily basis, you see xenophobic rhetoric, attacks on immigration, period, the attempt to and the actualization of stripping basic benefits that have been awarded to immigrants, and even the notion that we are indeed a country of immigrants. So what that means for each and every one of us in terms of what our responsibility is in this moment and how we respond to that is going to be individual and complex. I would simply say that if in any other moment, be it based on the awareness that you have or the education that you receive on the crises of refugees in Syria or what's happening here in the United States, find the thing that inspires you and that challenges you that you want to work on, and work on it. And find a way to organize and elevate the conversation and commit to seeing some realization of change.
I think for me, the idea, and I want to give an example of myself, just exactly what Lauren said. You look at yourself, you look at your skills, and think of how you can apply those skills. So for instance, I as an artist, I really needed and wanted to do something as an immigrant, right? And I also ask myself a question. I think where to start with, I think the first step is ask yourself a question: what is my responsibility as a person who lives in this country and reaps the benefits of this society and wants to preserve this society as it is and wants the progress to happen? What is my responsibility, and what do I pay back? How do I pay back? And so for me, my move and my reaction was like, okay, I'm an artist, so I'm going to use my skills and do something about it. And so whether you're a doctor or anybody, you look at what you can do, and there are so many creative and awesome initiatives. I went to Berlin last year, and Berlin, and Germany was hit with immigration wave with the refugee, and their response on a grassroots level. I mean, apart from the fact that Germany is very social oriented country, has beautiful social nets for people, the way people responded, they organized, so they had different types of organizations. For instance, they took responsibility of taking immigrants, refugees in, and shared rooms. They created apps where refugees could find locations where they could learn languages for free, where they could they created so many resources on a grassroots level. And here, even in New York, it's especially if you don't have papers, it's really difficult to find a good class, like English class. It's difficult. So a lot of organizations organize evenings where you can volunteer an hour of your time, and they literally set up tables, and you are a speaking partner, and you teach someone for free for an hour, right? A language, English language, or some people do it via Skype. Some people organize and sponsor families. Some people literally seek out resettlement agencies and say, okay, what kind of help do you need? This is what I can do for you. And it's kind of just thinking within the vicinity of your own skills and thinking how you can apply it, you know. And so I think for me it's you start with yourself and also hold yourself responsible, because if we all stand to the side, you know, I think nobody believed that it could happen here, and it happened, and nobody could believe that in Germany it could happen 100 years ago, and it happened. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. Trust me, I am from a country of dictatorship. I'm from Belarus, and I've been in countries where we think that something will change, and it just gets worse if we don't do anything. And so, for me, it's just your own initiative. I was also thinking it would be interesting to hear what kind of initiatives does the mayor office do, so that we can, you know, because sometimes I, even myself, as a person who kind of looks at the government or the mayor, like it's just so removed, and I feel like I can't even enter or approach that organization.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. So, you know, on the simplest of terms, the mission of our office is threefold. One is to advance an agenda of immigrant inclusion in New York City. It can be really broad. It can be everything from ensuring that there are really robust language access services across New York City. We just passed and signed into law the most kind of comprehensive and progressive language access bill in the country, requiring that every city agency have 10 languages in which they are translating all of their documents and providing all of the services in. That's huge. Nowhere else has something that extensive. We have a municipal ID program, an ID NYC if you don't have it. How many people have one who are New York City residents? Oh, wow, I really need to do the spiel to this crowd. All right. I have my agenda for the evening. Okay, so, you know, this is an ID card that's issued by New York City. It is available for anybody 14 years of age and older who's a New York City resident, and regardless of immigration status. And part of the sort of policy and agenda around this, the reason that this program exists is because you know, we wanted to, as a city, address obstacles that many vulnerable populations, not just immigrants or undocumented individuals, but seniors, domestic violence survivors, homeless individuals who are trans or don't identify with the gender in which they were given when they were born. And we created a program that really, through this one ID card, you're able to select your own gender. You're able to get the card, a U.S. government issued document, without having to have the U.S. issued government document. You're able to get it if you live in shelter. Various number of policies that allow you to interface with it. It's free, and you can use it to interact with all city agencies. It's accepted by local law enforcement, the NYPD. It can be used as your library card across all 3 of our branches. And part of what we did in the creation of the program is that it's great if we create this card, and ultimately the goal of having this program is to make sure that vulnerable populations and those who don't typically or aren't able to get government issued ID are able to, but we don't want to create a stigmatized card. We don't want a program that simply because you have this card, you're all of a sudden marked in some way, shape, or form. So we tried to think what makes sense for New Yorkers. What would everybody be interested in? How many of you would be interested in a free membership at 40 cultural institutions in New York City? Discounts on movie tickets? Sporting events? All right, so needless to say, it's a card for everyone. And the proof was in the pudding. We launched at the beginning of 2014 And at this moment, we have well over 1 million cardholders in New York City.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can get like free membership at BAM, the public discounts, even free entrances to museums. I've used it. It's great.
So, that's sort of like one example of how we see immigrant inclusion. I really went into that mission because you should all get your ID NYC, and it's as simple as going on the website, making an appointment, and as I said, it's free and really easy to get. We also have access to justice as the mission of our office, and so just this year, the mayor increased investments in services for immigrant communities to over $30 million in baseline funding. So that's funding that will continue from year to year. Again, the largest investment nationally in trying to ensure that all immigrant New Yorkers have access to free and safe services. We also spearhead, this is a little more on the inclusion side, but part of what you said, a program called We Are New York. And it actually works with immigrants and New Yorkers generally who want to give back, who volunteer just to facilitate English conversation classes and use kind of television series that we help develop that talk about how you interact in common settings and things like that. If that's something that you're interested in doing, we have volunteers that do that. Lastly, we do advocacy. We are part of a national coalition that's called Cities for Action. Just this past week was the 5th anniversary of the implementation of the DACA program. So the Dreamers program for young immigrants who came here before 15 years of age and don't have immigration status. That program is under threat in this administration. And what we did in our coalition was came together with over 100 mayors representing 55 million people nationally and called on the Trump administration to defend DACA and to keep that program going. And that's part of what we do as part of the advocacy that we do in that office. So that gives you a sliver of things. We also generally accept volunteers. We have a wonderful volunteer program in our office in different ways that you can plug in if that's something that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. And the opportunity very quickly to add to all these incredible suggestions. And sort of building a little bit on what Irene was saying, I'm an educator, sort of my background, so maybe that's where it's coming from. But I fundamentally believe in the importance of education, and there's so much that can be done today. I mean, we're not as helpless as we oftentimes think we are. Single individuals. I mean, Irene basically came up with this idea, and we're here now. So if each and every one of us, we tap into our individual creative energies and say, identify what it is that we're good at, and just focus on that, collaborate with people, incredible things can happen. I 100% believe that. So that being said, we have 3 questions on these cards. They seem to all be for Irene. So what, I think we may have touched on this one, but let's do this one. What is the story of Sami and Rima? We know little of their parents except that their father is alive, but they seem very close. Is there a background behind this?
Right. They're brother and sister, and they are, just going back to. I almost want to ask the actors. Okay, fine. Because they have their own backstory, and I'm afraid if I'm going to start telling you, then it's going to ruin tomorrow's performance. Because now they're going to have to think about what kind of truth is behind each of their characters. But I'm going to say that just generally about the characters and in the play. It's true, 90% of the words are people who shared their stories with me, but it's a collage of things. So, and when I was interviewing, I was interviewing people with the idea for the play. I knew I was going to write the play about it. So when I was listening to people's stories, in my mind, I already knew that if I heard if I could envision an interesting episode when a person was talking to me, I would elaborate it, right? I would try and get it out, and I didn't know where the episode would go, whose life it would be. but I knew that it was really exciting, and I would just keep that episode. And I would kind of keep collecting those episodes until I had enough, and I had to step back and kind of put them together. So Rima and Sami are, a typical part of a large family. They're brother and sister who are really close. Rima is married to a husband that she married her husband early. It was an arranged marriage, and she doesn't love him, but yet she is devoted to her family, and she's kind of dealing with that situation. And Sami is a young, passionate doctor who doesn't want to get married, and she's trying to marry him off, and he just still doesn't want to because he's too comfortable next to his sister and he's enjoying his life. And that's basically it. He wants to be a doctor, he wants to continue his work, and that's their life, and they love to talk about that.
So Sami mentions that he was the top in his class, and he had the highest score in the region, and he was applying to all these countries to try to get a visa.
Yeah.
Any chance, so there's a story that is actually about a doctor who was top of his class, I forget which university, that he also got the highest score on.
It's a true,
it is.
That
Actually was put on a blacklist because he had applied to so many visas. He was actually put on a blacklist, and he wasn't able to leave the country. He was actually detained. So that I was curious if that was if this is part of kind of what you
was
wove
part
into
of the
Sami.
narrative. Yeah.
Everything you told in this play is true, and there's actually worse things in reality happen. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what, going back to the feedback that we've gotten, and some people said, there's so much violence in this play, and I realized that there's really no violence, because the violence is in people's imaginations. It is incited. It comes into your imagination. Somebody was like, "There's this torture scene." It's like, what torture scene? There's nothing. But then, it's because you fill in the gaps and you realize what it was, and of course things are much worse. But our goal was to kind of focus on not on the shock factor, not on the shock value, but on the human value of the story. Yeah. Is there any?
So this next question, what other issues would you think would make an impact through theatre? I think all issues can potentially be.
Oh my gosh, yes! It's an uncloud field. We have so much to do. It's amazing. I think to me, theater is a very beautiful thing because theater is for kids. Because it alleviates responsibility in a way. We can tell a story, and we just say we're playing, but yet when you're playing, it leaves a real emotional impact, and that's something we're missing in real lives, or missing in the news, in the political discourse, in the academic discourse. Those human emotional things that make us human through play are missing, and in many ways, I mean, all of the decision making though is emotional. Like, it's reactional. Look at our president. Like, it's emotional, and so for me, theater is like such a wonderful way to enter very serious issues, or issues that we've been numbed, right? Through our hearts, through our emotions, and theater is the most unique place because you get to relive stories that have happened, and you get sometimes to change the scenario. So theater gives you the power of a narrative where you're in control of the narrative. In your life, you can't control, right? Things just happen to you, and you just kind of go along. But in theater, you have an ability to control the narrative, and that's the beauty of it, because then you can tell the story in a certain way where you can zoom in on something.
And can it also, am I imagining this, that theatre can be used in a therapeutic So
Yeah,
it's
this-
what we mentioned about
right.
changing the narrative.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
the Angle Project. It's my organization that is co-producing this. So the second half of the another branch of the Angle Project is educational social work. And so we use theater and performance arts to help with integration and to help work with refugees and the hosting communities. And one of the techniques that we use is role play, because and in drama therapy as well. So what it means is you can reflect on your own life by reliving it, but not only that, you get to create your own scenario of what you would want your life to be. You know, like, it's power of conviction, right? We know how we can envision a life for ourselves, and if we envision it well enough, we can actually achieve certain things. It's the same thing. So not only we're able to have this cathartic moment of like reliving what we've had, but we also understand that we have the power to change our own narrative. And that's part of the kind of drama therapy that we're using.
And finally,
in our work.
who was the elderly woman in black? What was her significance?
She represented mourning. She represented the motherhood. That, you know, how many mothers lost their children. I mean, if you look at the Syrian conflict and you Google and you just see all these mothers in these positions mourning over bodies, whether it's their young children or old children, or husbands, and it's just this mourning mother, you know, and it's the country that's mourning, it's the world that's mourning, and it's also the person who just kind of keeps going. She keeps going. She's just kind of, no matter what happens to her, and so that's the symbol.
Are there any further questions?
So, when you guys do the whole the Syrian dance with the beautiful song, and they all come together, all the characters, although they're all in different scenes, they're all coming together. What was your intention behind that? We sort of get an idea, but what is your exact intention?
Well, I think it's kind of, in a way, it's Rima's death, and it's a symbolic way. It's the swan song. It's her last song. And Montigny, the song that you're hearing, is this very iconic, patriotic song that has been around for many years. That talks about the homeland and the beauty, and that we won't give up. And these guys actually sang it. That's them singing recorded. It's her last song, but also it's her death, and after, it's kind of this cathartic moment when everybody comes together, but kind of super clear moment of clarity, after which things are not the same. Something changes, something snaps, Rima dies, and it's a turning point for many of them. So
A couple of yes.
Two questions, if I may. You said you went into the interview process with an idea of the narrative you would go on to construct, but was there anything while you were interviewing you felt, oh, I hadn't anticipated that this happened, and now I have to change my narrative? Okay.
No, you know, I actually went in with one question. There was an initial question. I mean, apart from just kind of knowing that I wanted to investigate cultural context, whatnot, but my biggest question was like, what would you want to tell me? Because a lot of times you ask questions about, you know, what I want to know about you. Instead, I asked them, what do you want? Because everybody knew I was going to write a play. It was, I told everybody I interviewed, it is going to be a play, and I hope that interview will make it, or part of it. So I asked them, what would you like the world to know about you? What is important for people to know? And that inspired a lot of the conversation, because that was them knowing that it was anonymous, but yet knowing that something important was to be said was yeah. So I didn't have a narrative in mind at all to begin with.
And as you've already mentioned, literally 90% of the words in the play are the actual literal words of people interviewed. Right?
Yeah, there's an ironic situation is, you know, every person's story is so unique, but every person's story is another person's story. So even though we think that about each person we can write a book, like each life is a book, but yet there are so many similar tendencies, especially in the displacement process, that also it was not very difficult to combine live episodes from different people because the narratives kind of were parallel to each other.
Yes.
Kind of going off that, like from the beginning, did you have the idea about her books, like all of her stories and stuff, kind of being a symbol for all the people who didn't get to tell them? Was that like from the beginning, or did that come along as you progressed? Right.
You mean the episode, the reference to 51 notebooks?
Yeah.
It was a true episode from somebody's life. And it didn't occur to me to put it in the play until the play was written, and I thought that something was missing. And I went to the transcripts and I reread it, and I was like, that's what was missing. That what kind of holds it together is what's our story and how is it going to be remembered. Yeah.
Well, thank you for writing this play. And my name is Ahmed. I'm from Syria, and this play kind of, brought things into reality, and it was a great thing to educate people about what's happening in Syria. So if you could just give me a few minutes to add a few things. Ahmad was the one who represented me in this play. I came here to do medical training, and it was a really touching moment when Ahmad was sitting here, and this nostalgia came to his mind. Those feelings that was really touching. I mean, the second thing is about a little bit of politics. The play did not go much into politics, but I would like to tell people that in Syria, when it started with peaceful protests for 6 months, and then the Free Syrian Army started, and it was mainly composed of soldiers who refused to shoot protesters, and they defected from the regime, and they formed what was the Free Syrian Army, which represented people and tried to fight against Assad to liberate Syria from dictatorship. And then ISIS came afterwards, 2 years after, and actually there were 3 fighting parties in Syria, and ISIS had no intention or interest in toppling Assad. They had their own interests, and actually they fought against the Free Syrian Army. So the media and people get confused about what's happening in Syria. They think it's terrorists against Assad. It's totally incorrect. It's Assad, Free Syrian Army, people who wanted Assad just to step down and, free Syria. And then ISIS came later on just to make things messed up. And unfortunately, refugees were marked as terrorists and as ISIS, and that's completely correct. The third thing that really impressed me in the play was the scenes of violence. People should see this because what's happening in Syria is 100 times more than what you just saw here. And people in prison, their bones were broken, they were starved to death, and some people just suffocated from, having too many people in the room and not having enough air, and they just died from not having fresh air. So the horror that happened in Syria is huge, and this play kind of tried to bring that into reality. I was really happy when you saw you just shouting. This shouting just brings the intensity of the soldiers and the way they treat people. So I think most important thing is to educate people about what's happening, and it's not just what you hear about in the news. It's just to see things in reality happen. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Ahmad. And I just wanted to add, we've been, it's kind of as a conclusion to this answer. We've been talking to a lot of people who represent the conflict zones, and I'm interested in the displacement process in general. The Engel Project works with displacement, like it's environmental displacement. We're going to have a lot of environmental refugees. Islands are disappearing. And just the idea of displacement and idea of refugee, we have to understand it's going to be relevant for a very, very long time. We can't we can't refuse it, because we have people, we will have more people that will be asking for help. So we have to learn we have to find mechanisms how we can react to this, how we can cope with this, because it will get only worse, and Middle East is going to have a lot of problems for a very long time to come. So it's something that we need to start addressing right now.
Thank you so much. On that,
Is there anything else
oh,
before
what
we?
was, yeah. Did someone else? Someone hasn't asked yet. No. Okay. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
Sorry. Kind of going off of that, like with all the tension and stuff, like violence system. Are you scared that if, or do you have any fears that if this play does go a lot more like out there and a lot more people know about it and hear about it, that there's going to be any like negative reactions?
That I'm
or,
gonna
like-
be in trouble?
Like-
We have already had negative reactions, and it's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great because that's when the conversation happens. Because when everything is great and everybody is content, that's how Trump got elected. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to confront, like, unless you touch something, unless you kind of wiggle it, you don't know what that is. So we have to start kind of encroaching on the conflict. We have to engage. And I think having these conversations is important, and I'm all for it.
I think the best kind of art is the art that divides people. People either love it or hate it. Best kind of anything. And who wants to be like liked by everyone? That's just pop music, right? I hate pop music. But, what was that? Anyone else?
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.